So, what in the world is a preacher who studied philosophy, the love of human wisdom, supposed to say about a passage like this? Margaret, thank you for that song. It reminded me of those times in my life when I was desperately looking for something true, for something real to believe in. And she didn't tell you, I was a creepy little kid. When she knew me in high school, I had blue hair and orange hair and you name it. I was on a quest. And through philosophy, I found peace. I found that through the love of philosophy and through reflecting on human wisdom, that there really was this awareness of an infinite and benevolent presence in our lives. So, through philosophy, I came to faith, and specifically faith in Jesus. And then I read all of the New Testament, including passages like this. So I was taken aback. Wait a minute, Paul, I thought. Human wisdom isn't all bad. That's how I came to faith. The love of wisdom has motivated women and men to learn and do great things, from learning more about our world, to learning more about ourselves, to learning how to cure devastating diseases. So how can human wisdom be all bad? Don't passages like these give ammunition to those who dismiss Christianity as a system of naive belief and wishful thinking? Doesn't it give ammunition to those who understand Christianity as a life-denying instead of a life-affirming tradition? This passage in particular bothered me for so many years that I preferred not to read 1 Corinthians 1. But it gets even worse. He doesn't stop at the first chapter. He goes on for 3 chapters talking about the dangers of human wisdom and the virtue of foolishness. As luck would have it, when it came time to take my required New Testament exegesis course in seminary, the only class that fit into my schedule was 2 Corinthians. Oh no, I thought, not Paul and his assault on human wisdom and strength. It's sure to come up. I better not tell my peers, and especially my professor, that I try not to read the first 3 chapters of the first letter to the Corinthians. But a wonderful thing happened. I learned about the context of the town of Corinth. I learned about the concrete situation that Paul was addressing and why he felt necessary to give this cryptic warning about human wisdom and to contrast it with what he calls the foolishness of God revealed in Jesus. The town of Corinth had been relatively unimportant until the 1st century. As trade and commerce in the area increased, though, it soon became an important city because it was situated between 2 seaports. It became a popular and important destination and trade route. There's a tremendous disparity between the rich and the poor in the city. Most of the inhabitants of Corinth had been very poor, but some of them had become rich because of all of this new travel and tradespeople passing through, who were eager to spend their money or to exchange their goods. There were plenty of people passing through town looking to hire female and male prostitutes. There were lots of visitors who wanted strong drink. And there were plenty of people passing through who wanted a fine meal. So some of the inhabitants of Corinth that had a good business sense became quite rich. Those who didn't remained poor and were looked down upon by the new rich. Those who became rich credited their skill and their wisdom with becoming rich. And those who failed to seize the opportunity were viewed as weak and foolish. But something incredible happened in Corinth. Paul, a new Christian, came to town telling the people about the good news of God's reign and God's reconciliation in Jesus. Some of the skillful and wise Corinthians who had become rich became believers. Some of the most competitive, scheming, and worldly people in town became followers of Jesus. It's incredible. It's like some of the fixtures in our own pop culture and reality shows, like Donald Trump, the Kardashians, and the American Idol judges suddenly finding Jesus. It's wonderful. But how do they sort everything out? Some of the more humble and poor men and women in Corinth became Jesus followers too, and a new complex situation arose. The rich and the poor suddenly found themselves standing shoulder to shoulder, singing the same hymns and sharing the Lord's Supper together. In a perfect world, all the bad feelings, the feelings that the rich had against the poor, believing that they were lazy and foolish, and also the feelings that the poor had against the rich, that they were worldly and corrupt, all these feelings would have gone away. But their world was not perfect, and neither is ours. So the suspicions and the rejection lingered. The rich and the poor members of the church didn't want to share the Lord's Supper with each other anymore. Members became increasingly competitive and hostile toward each other. They started suing each other in court. They started having relationships with their in-laws, and so on. I won't get into those because this is a family church. But they had some real problems. So Paul was disturbed that the members of this newly formed congregation began to compete against each other in a kind of spiritual game that they made up. Maybe it was a reflection of their competition-loving culture. We're getting ready to celebrate yet another round of Olympic Games that began so long ago in the Greek culture. The members of the Corinthian congregation began arguing that each individual's spiritual gift was more impressive than the others. The one that had the gift of teaching would look down on the one that had the gift of faith. The one who could speak in otherworldly languages looked down on the one who only had the gift of generosity, and so on. The church was being torn apart by competition and grudges. What they needed, and what Paul saw, was it love and forgiveness. The famous love chapter is found in 1 Corinthians. You know, the one that we hear at weddings. Love is patient, love is kind, love does not seek its own. Now abide these three, faith, hope, love, but the greatest of these is love, and so on. Love unites people and helps them overcome the instinct to compete, to boast, and to hold grudges. But it was a hard lesson for the Corinthian church to learn because they were used to living by the wisdom of their day. It's the same wisdom that we have in our own day. Don't get mad, get even. Do to others before they do to you. If you betray me, you're dead to me. The poor are poor because they choose to be. We hear these same things today. This is the kind of wisdom that Paul was combating in his letter to the Corinthian church. The kind of wisdom that Jesus shared: forgive as you have been forgiven. Do to others as you would have them do to you. Seek reconciliation with those you have a conflict with. Have compassion for the hungry and the sick and the poor. This wisdom of Jesus was viewed as foolishness to the Corinthians because it doesn't help you get ahead. So many in our time cannot understand how a woman could forgive someone who hurt her family and even visit them in prison. So many in our time just can't understand how a child at a basketball game could pass the ball to a developmentally disabled child and let him make the last basket and let him be the hero and the star, even if it costs them the game. There are countless stories of people who've been grasped by the wisdom of God, which appears as foolishness to a competitive, boastful, and unforgiving culture. I'd like to share one of these stories right now. It's the story of a woman from Burundi who demonstrates the healing, transforming power of forgiveness.
Children. Her name is Maggie Barankiste, and her story is truly remarkable.
My vocation is to distribute hope, to give love. It's our human vocation.
That mission started in her home country of Burundi in 1993. Thousands were killed as tension between the country's two main ethnic groups, Tutsis and Hutus, grew to its boiling point. Children were not spared in the murders, and neither was her own family.
They tied me, and they began to kill in front of me 72 persons. Since this time, this is my message.
She survived. Other survivors were mutilated. From that point on, she decided to open the Maison Shalom, where orphan children from both ethnic groups are welcomed. Then she began to help former child soldiers and even children living with AIDS. But her message isn't just about giving. Most importantly, it's about forgiveness. She forgave the criminal who burned her 3 aunts. She even went as far as to visit him in prison. She says hate kills, but forgiveness frees the soul.
It's not so easy to forgive. To forgive is a gift. But I am Christian, and I know that Jesus on the cross said, "Please, Father, forgive them. They don't know what to do, what they have done."
A young woman she adopted as an orphan child recently got married. One of Maggie's proudest moments came during the girl's wedding day. The man who killed the young woman's parents was there.
She stand up and she went and she said, "Now I can forgive you forever because of our mom, because she taught to us to stand up and to fight in dignity without violence."
With help from supporters, Maggie has opened roughly 130 more centers like a Maison Shalom in Burundi, where thousands are helped every day. While receiving the international prize of the Colombe de Oro honor in Rome, she said the challenge of helping needy children is big, but the human spirit is even bigger and stronger.
This brave woman, Maggie, suffered an unimaginable loss. Yet her Christian faith made it possible for her to forgive the people who hurt her family. She saw in her own woundedness the possibility of doing something new and courageous to help those who suffered the same kind of horrible crime that she suffered, and help them to find the power to forgive as well. Maggie's act of forgiveness was the catalyst to bring new life and new peace to countless others. She pointed to Jesus as her inspiration to forgive. She recalled his prayer to God, that God forgive those that mistreated Jesus. Jesus believed so strongly in the wisdom of God, the wisdom that all of creation and everyone and everything in it was God's beloved, and that love and peace will eventually win out over hate and violence. that he was willing to suffer at the hands of those who thought he was the greatest fool of all time. He was foolish according to the wisdom of the world. His own family misunderstood him and thought that he was ill. His closest friends misunderstood him and abandoned him when he needed them the most. His message of love and justice for all was misunderstood as a zealous attack on the Roman government. Yet in the midst of all of this, he was so full of the wisdom of God that he sensed God's presence even then. Even on the cross, he held on to the hope of the new creation. So maybe this is what Paul was getting at when he encouraged the Corinthian church to think twice about the wisdom of the world. Was it really wisdom? Did it really offer the power that people were looking for? What about the power of the new creation that Jesus came to establish and to announce? It looks like foolishness to the world, and yet those who have tasted it have found a courage and a power and a strength that is greater than anything the world can provide. It has the power to transform rage into serenity, hate into love, despair into hope, violence into peace, and death into life. What bits of competitiveness or unforgiveness are we holding on to that limit this power from working in and through us? May we learn from Maggie and from Jesus how to transform our own woundedness into spaces in which we can let the new creation and the wisdom of God flow through us. May we learn to forgive and love each other, and may we seek forgiveness from one another. And may we also forgive and love ourselves when we do so imperfectly. By doing so, we will discover anew the wisdom of God and share it with our world. Amen.